So I would ask officials from the CSIRO to quickly make their way to the front table. Do we have an opening statement from them at this table?
Yes, we do have from Net Zero Economy. I don't think we have anything from the CSIRO.
Okay. So just while the CSIRO is making their way to the table, I will let people know that we have a finish of 10 p.m. We've worked very hard to make sure there is time. I would also note that the Senate agreed last week to an inquiry into funding and resources into the CSIRO with submissions open now with a reporting date of 31st of March next year. So there will be plenty more time outside of this hearing to ask questions. And I'm going to go to Senator Whish-Wilson, and I'm going to split the time evenly between the two of you of what we have left. Do you have an opening statement that you wish to table?
I think, given the time, perhaps not.
Okay. Do you have anything to table?
No.
No. Okay. Okay, Senator Pocock.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate there's a lot going on in this committee, but I just want to put on the record that I think it is farcical that we have 12 minutes for the CSIRO in the lead up to my EFO, given what's happening and given that last time CSIRO appeared, I think Senator had five minutes. I know that's not your problem, but I think as a committee we should be willing to actually go a little bit later so we can actually interrogate things here. Professor Hilton, thank you, and your team, thank you for waiting so long. Love the Greater Glider. It was a yellow belly. The government confirmed in question time last week that and I'll quote them, there has been a decision taken by the government through the MyEFO process to provide additional funding for the CSIRO. When were you notified of that decision?
I'm not sure we've been officially notified of that decision. That's probably a matter for government and MyEFO.
Were you aware that there was a good prospect you would get this funding when you made the decision to cut 350 research jobs?
Senator, no. The decision to review our science portfolio and the consequence to jobs is separate from our sustainability issue. I think it's really important for us to emphasise that.
And do you envisage any further job cuts at scale after the 350, or does 350 bring you to financial sustainability at your funding envelope plus $100 million?
As we've discussed, CSIRO requires to invest $80 to $135 million, probably for the best part of a decade, in order to ensure our facilities are safe, fit for purpose, modern, the sort of facilities commensurate with a science agency tackling the big problems for the country. And we would look at all measures for finding that money.
And what does your modelling show? Will there need to be further job cuts after the 350, or can you do those things on your current funding envelope and maintain facilities, etc.?
That would depend on our budget trajectory. And we would look at all measures before we would embark on job cuts.
Have you modelled on your current budget trajectory?
We've modelled we've taken a number of different scenarios in our modelling, and I could perhaps hand to Mr Munyard if you'd like to discuss the details of those models.
Tom Munyard, Chief Operating Officer. So we have modelled, as Dr Hilton said, we require $80 to $135 million in order to fund the work that we need to do to get to sustainability. We're working with government at the moment around our budget parameters beyond 25-26 and 26-27 in order to be able to determine exactly what the impact of that will be.
And Dr Hilton, given you're having to shed researchers, have you requested more funding from the government beyond the $100 million in MyEFO?
We're in constant communication with government about CSIRO's challenges for sustainability.
Okay. I know I'm running up on time on it. Minister, maybe just one or two questions. I'm interested why there hasn't been more investment in research and science over the last 3.5 years of the Albanese government, and I had a few people raise concerns after your Academy of Science speech in September, and they made the sort of observation that you talked about the $22.7 billion for Future Made in Australia, you talked about export earnings from iron ore, your investment in Whyalla, but there was no real mention of the $51 billion in higher ed exports, no mention of investing in more science and research. And an academic actually messaged me today saying, maybe I'll start wearing high vis to work, then maybe I'll have a real job. And as I'm just concerned, all I see is a science and research sector under siege. If we look at the facts, more than 1,000 jobs cut at the ANU, other universities are shedding jobs too, 1,100 jobs being cut at CSIRO, 20 or more jobs now to be cut at the ARC, we learn, before the CSIRO review actually reports. And we also know that NHMRC grants are at record low award rates.
So there's a series of...
What is going here? I mean, I had an Australian researcher write to me this morning and said, the system is not only dehumanised, it is now dehumanising. How do we turn this around, Minister? Surely we can do better than this as a country.
Well, a couple of just to walk through a couple of those points. First of all, you've asserted $100 million in my FO. I'm not sure beyond the newspaper where that figure comes from, but
I think it was in the lower house in response to a question from one of the independents.
We will make an announcement in due course, and of course we're engaged. The government's been engaged with Professor Hilton about that and what scale of additional expenditure is required on top of the annual amount that the government makes available for the CSIRO. The second thing is that the process that the organisation is going through now is, one of the reasons that it's quite important to separate out those sustainability questions from the prioritisation questions is that it's very much about the CSIRO being very clear about what its purpose is as a applied science and industrial research organisation. And you've got to be careful, I think, and respectful about the way that you talk about that, because there are people there who've been doing very important work for the country, but decisions have not been made for 15 years or so about lining up those, about going through a proper prioritisation exercise, and that is what is going on here. There are no funding cuts for the CSIRO. There are no funding cuts for the CSIRO.
It's going down like this.
Sorry?
It's going down like this.
Well, there are no funding cuts for the CSIRO.
In real terms.
I also don't think it's helpful to pit the position of workers in industrial facilities, current or prospective.
I'm saying they're equal. They should be equal.
I understand that, and I'll try and make the point. Part of the purpose of the CSIRO is to do the science that is required to drive investment in new technology and new industrial facilities. That's the mobilisational purpose. The excitement of the work that they do is about future iron production in Australia, future engineering opportunities in places like Gladstone, in the Hunter Valley, in Latrobe. That is the national interest question that they are there to serve.
Yeah, but who's advocating for scientists?
Well, and that is
You're always talking about
this reprioritisation focuses much of the work of the CSIRO on is those national interest priorities on climate adaptation work, on a series of these programs that really matter for our future.
Thank you.
Looking at a very limited time that I've got. Dr. Hilton, how much did you know when you were hired about the dire state of CSIRO's finances, in particular the issue that has become public about the capital costs of maintenance or replacement of assets?
Certainly the challenge of maintaining a property portfolio that includes facilities in every state and territory, metro facilities, regional facilities and remote facilities, was discussed at my interview, and so I went in pretty eyes wide open.
Right, okay. And how long have you known about it for, Dr Mayfield? You've been there for some time. I understand you merged the Oceans and Atmospheres and Water and Land units back in 2021. How long have you been aware of this funding cliff?
So, Dr Peter Mayfield, so Executive Director for Environment, Energy and Resources. So I think managing our budget has been an ongoing challenge for all my time at CSIRO. It's something that we have to do on a day-by-day basis. In terms of how we've tried to balance between
I'm not being
infrastructure.
bulky, it's just that I've only got 2 minutes, so could you just answer when you first knew about this? Or have you known about it the entire time you've been there?
In terms of, I guess, the level of underinvestment in infrastructure, that's something we've been working on over the last period of time since Dr Hilton's come on board.
Can you be specific?
I think it's just work that we've been doing across each budget year. So,
right.
So it's.
When the Minister said it's been known. Oh, sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things where trying to determine what's the right level of investment to sustain or to make things work very well. We've probably adopted a scarcity sustaining position for some time, but it's no longer tenable. Yeah.
So back when you merged these units, I understand it didn't include the nature or the environment section, but it did include the other units that make up the current ERU. Were job cuts considered back then in 2021?
No, when we brought the land and water and the oceans and atmosphere units together, the intention was for us to get greater synergy between the two. There's a lot of overlap between what they're doing, especially in climate. We wanted them to work together and do that in a more efficient way. So we brought that together 3 years ago, and that's how we've operated since then. 3 years ago.
Okay, so the job cuts that your staff are facing now didn't happen overnight. How long have you been planning them for?
We've been working through our budgets over the last...
How long have you been planning them for?
Planning? At this point in time, we've been doing work during this course of this year to understand our sustainability position.
Yes, Senator, I think it's important to understand that we made those decisions having a look at the whole portfolio. There's work we do that is positive for the environment in a range of our research units, and I think that's one of the things we wanted to overcome, this siloing of science that can sometimes happen in organisations that have distinct units. So, I would estimate, just as a back of an envelope calculation, that 60 to 70% of our research portfolio is aimed at climate change, net zero, the energy transition, biodiversity, invasive species, biosecurity. And I think looking at the totality of the portfolio rather than looking unit by unit was a really deliberate thing that we set out to do this year.
So, Senator Pocock's already asked questions about any additional cuts, and we can get into that in a bit more detail later on. But could you explain why 150 of the job cuts out of the 350 that have been flagged are going to be in the ERU?
We have 1 minute.
Yep.
I think there's a couple of answers to that. As Dr Mayfield indicated, the merger of the units happened 3 years ago. Bedding down that merger, looking at what synergies can occur, bringing groups together is something that we've taken our time to do. So those changes in the environment unit are ones that in some ways have accumulated over those 3 years. In the case of health and biosecurity, also significant numbers of staff potentially impacted, on top of changes that we made a year to 18 months ago. So for the health and biosecurity, we've done that in 2 tranches. For other units, also significant cuts, and I want to acknowledge that for any staff member impacted, it's significant. But in the others, in the case of, for example, the energy unit, a lot of the changes in the research portfolio occurred 5 years ago as we transitioned our research from supporting fossil fuels and extractive industries more to critical minerals, energy transition and other things. So each unit is in a different part of that cycle.
Okay.
And just last question, once again we could go into this in more detail. I understand you're looking at 350 job cuts for now. Are any of them going to be in senior or middle management as well, or is it just going to be in the lower paid workers?
No, not at all. We'll look across all levels. I think that's a really important thing to do, and make those strategic choices. At the moment we're in early engagement, and I really respect the process we have with our union. So we're going through early engagement. There have been no positions yet identified. We'll go through that process. We'll develop a range of solutions to the problems we're facing. We'll consult with staff next year about those and come to a plan in due course.
And is it true that some staff have been asked to, or staff have been asked to provide written summaries about not only their own work but where they think there should be cuts in their divisions, or where they're
not quite sure.
I mean, it's been referred to in the media as a Hunger Games approach to.
No, I think
I don't know what that means, but I have heard that staff have been required to provide feedback to their head of divisions about where they think. We could use lots of MBA words here about efficiencies could be found or whatever. Is that
no?
the case?
That's not how I would characterise the process at all. I think that's a pretty unjust characterisation of the process. We spent 4 days with 300 of our most senior scientists reviewing our portfolio, and I think that collective leadership and the use of the brains of some of the smartest people in the country to look at the portfolio, identify areas where we could come together to do things better is exactly what I would hope any organisation I led would do. It was very constructive.
The junior staff haven't been asked to do that, provide feedback into that process either.
We're going to conclude the hearing now. Thank you very much. So it concludes the committee's consideration of the 2025-26 supplementary budget estimates. Thank you to the CSIRO people who waited a long time. I thank Minister Ayres and Chisholm and officers of the Department of Industry, Science, Energy and Resource Portfolio who've given the committee evidence over the entirety of the day. Thank you to Hansard and Broadcasting. Thank you to my fellow senators, particularly my Deputy Chair, who's helped manage the day as best as we could. Wish everyone a very Merry Christmas and declare the hearing